Excellent. Well, thank you to our previous panel, Make Web3 Great Again. Exciting talk coming up for you guys. Please welcome Tomer Ganor from Certora. He's going to be talking about securing liquid staking with Lido's dual governance revolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm here today to talk to you about cool bugs and issues I found during reviewing Lido's dual governance design. So let's start. So who am I? I'm Tomer Ganor, working at Certora for 2.5 years as a tech lead and security researcher. I've audited a lot of liquid staking, risk-taking, DEXs, lending protocols, and today we're going to talk about the biggest, Lido. So Lido is the biggest liquid staking protocol. If you need to see what they are, there's the website, but I'm sure everybody knows them. And I've reviewed the design of Lido dual governance a year ago. Design review is basically looking at the design before the code is even written, which means that we can fix a lot of these issues and similar and other issues that I found even before we started development, and saving crucial development time and a lot of money. After that, we at Certora audited the dual governance mechanism in September, and then we re-audited in January, of course also formally verified. It's great. So let's start with the problem. So the problem that we have and what we want to solve is that malicious DAOs might want to steal all of the user's assets. By passing a malicious proposal, it just says, I want to steal your assets. And then the stakers or depositors of the protocol have a problem. They need to leave and fast. So usually we have two mechanisms that help us to prevent this from happening. The first one is Guardian multisigs, which after the Bytebit hack, I think we all know that it's not very, we can't trust them with 100% certainty because they might not work as expected. So we need to avoid counting them fully. Also, we have time locks. So time locks works for other DAOs, for example, for DEXs and lending protocols, because you can immediately withdraw your funds after you saw the malicious proposal that's stealing all of your funds away. Which means that if we have a time lock of 3 days, 5 days, maybe a week, depending on which protocol we're looking at, a week is enough. 3 days are enough to withdraw your funds because they are liquid. But in Lido, like other liquid staking protocols, this is not the case, because the withdrawal mechanism of Ethereum has a variety of withdrawal times. It might be days, or it might be even months, which is very, very problematic. If you have any malicious proposal that want to steal all of your ETH, you will not be able to withdraw it in time, which means that we have a proposal that says, I want to steal all of your ETH, and then you try to withdraw. It takes like 1 month, and then the proposal executes in 3 days, and your money is already gone. So that's, of course, the problem we want to solve, and we need a dynamic time lock to do it. So let's see how Lido's initial design looked. So first, we have the DAO. The DAO just votes like any other DAO on a proposal. Once the proposals have passed, we submit it. You see the sub and execute there. So we submit it to the dual governance mechanism, which means that now the time lock of 3 days starts. After the 3 days ends, then we can execute the proposal. This is the state in 99% of the cases. This is the regular state, like any other DAO. What's new here is that now we have another state, which is the Vita cooldown state. Inside of the Vita cooldown state, we need to be in this state for 24 hours, and this state we can only execute and not submit anything, which means that if there are previously submitted proposals that exist, we can execute them. Otherwise, we cannot submit anything new. But this state only lasts for 24 hours, which is not that long. Also, just a reminder, all of the numbers I'm saying, the 3 days for the time lock, the 24 hours, different numbers I'm going to say right now, they're only temporary numbers for now until Lido's DAO approve everything, which means that they might change. For example, the Vita cooldown duration was 24 hours, and now it's 6 hours. It's the same ballpark, but it's not exactly the same numbers because the DAO might change the numbers before they approve it. So let's continue. The most interesting state is this state, the Vita signaling state. So as you can see, in the Vita signaling state, we can only submit and we cannot execute, which means that if there is a malicious proposal that's going to steal all of our funds, once we get in this state, they cannot execute it, which means that even if the 3 days have passed, we still are safe from malicious DAO theft. How do we get into this state? We need to lock 1% of STETH, which is $300 million, which is a lot, I know, into the escrow contract. And then once we reach this threshold, we transfer into this state, and in it, we need to continue depositing more and more and more STETH until we reach a threshold of 10% of STETH after 45 days. And if we fail to do it, then we revert to the deactivation phase. The deactivation phase is a temporary phase, very short, 24 hours in length. And we cannot submit and execute during that. I'm sure the non-execution part is very clear. Otherwise, the malicious DAO can just steal all of our funds, which is bad, of course. And the anti-submit part is there to allow the stakers sort of to de-escalate the situation. Maybe the DAO wants to explain to the stakers, oh, there is a misunderstanding, everything is okay, you misunderstood the proposal, and then we want to allow them to unlock their funds or to not lock more funds to continue supporting the veto signaling. And then after 24 hours, if the stakers are convinced that the proposal is not malicious or cannot convince enough other people to deposit more funds, then we transfer to the veto cooldown, which means that now we can execute those proposals, everything is okay, and for 24 hours in the initial design, and then we can go back to the normal or to continue the protocol. If we are able to get to 45 days and 10% of the funds, which is $3 billion, which is of course a lot of money, then after 45 days, we reach to the rage quit state. The rage quit state, like the veto signaling state, is the same. We cannot execute to prevent the theft of the funds from the users, but we can submit. Once we reach this state, it's very simple. We transfer all of the funds of the stakers to the withdrawal queue and request to withdraw them from the beacon layer. Which means that we're waiting maybe days, maybe weeks, until the funds come back. Then we distribute them to the stakers. Until then, we stay in this state. Only once the funds return to the stakers, then we transfer back to either normal state, if everything is fine, or to the veto signaling state, if there is another malicious proposal that wants to be executed, because the DAO submitted it. All of the stakers that didn't join the initial veto signaling rage quit, and then let's say we went to the normal state, they cannot complain, even if there is a malicious proposal that exists, because we were at veto signaling and they had 45 days to join. If they didn't join, then the rage quit happens, and then they cannot blame Lido, they cannot blame anyone, because they should have joined, and they cannot complain. So let's see what can break here. So first, we have the flash run attack. So what is the flash run attack? The flash run attack starts in normal state, and we have, of course, a flash run provider. The attacker flash loans enough funds from the flash run provider to lock inside of the escrow and trigger the veto signaling state. At this point in time, the threshold of 1% or 1% is met, so we transfer to the veto signaling state in which we can only submit, cannot execute. Then, because it's a flash run, we need to repay fast, right? Which means that we need to unlock the funds and transfer them back to the flash run provider. By doing so, we transition to the deactivation phase. In this phase, as you can see there is no submission and no execution. But don't worry, it's only for 24 hours, right? After 24 hours, everything go back to usual. So wrong, because we can do it again. Before the 24 hours have passed, we can again take the flash loan, lock the funds inside of the escrow, which means that, again, we refresh the clock for the deactivation to 24 hours, or starts again soon. So next time we'll be in the deactivation, the 24 hours starts again. Now we're in the veto signaling, and we again unlock our funds, transfer back to the deactivation state with a new 24 hours clock. We repay the flash loan and wait again. So this loop can be done continuously again by flash loaning, locking, unlocking, and repayment. If we do it once every 24 hours, the system stays in deactivation continuously, which means that there is no submissions and no executions at all. But after 45 days, that unfortunately for the attacker, he cannot rage quit the funds and make the system to wait more, because those funds are getting locked in the withdrawal queue, which means that they cannot unlock them and return the flash loans. So everything is okay, right? So not so sure. It's not that fast because once we go to the activation, we transfer to the Vito cooldown. In the Vito cooldown, we can execute. So everything should be okay. But the problem is because we are continuously for 45 days straight inside of the deactivation state, we couldn't submit anything during this state, which means that there is no submissions happening even during the deactivation and during the Vito cooldown, which means that even if we wanted and we can execute something, but we have nothing to execute, which means that now if we do it continuously forever, this entire iteration, we will be forever in deactivation for 45 days, then in Vito cooldown for 24 hours, and then again, the activation 45 days, with the cooldown for 24 hours, which means that we can never submit anything, and then DAO is stuck forever. So that's, of course, very bad. And just a reminder, the attacker didn't need to have any funds to do it, so he can just flash on everything, so no money, and you can just make the dual governance to be stuck forever. That's, of course, a big problem. So there is a small white hack that Lido or some white hat can do to try to help the system in this design. It's not solve everything, but it's a small improvement. So what a white hat can do is be like a hacker. He can take a flash loan and lock it. So during the deactivation, we take a flash loan, we lock the funds. By doing that, we are transferring to the Vito signaling state, in which, a reminder, we can submit. We cannot execute, but we can submit. This is a very important part, because now we can submit the proposal that the DAO wanted. And the problem before, reminder, it was that we have no submissions. We have an execution period, but we have no submissions. So now we can sort of enable the submission to happen. And then, of course, like we submit, and then we, of course, need to unlock and then return the flash loan. But once we did this, we are able to submit proposals. There is still the problem in which an attacker with zero funds can make the system to be delayed for 45 days from the point of submission to the point of execution instead of 3 days, which is, of course, only if the user had this amount of, a lot of funds, 10%, $3 billion of STE, only then he should be allowed to delay the system. And even then, we still had to attack the system to make it operate partially. Of course, that's very bad. So how do we solve this? So wait, again? Okay, now. Okay, so the first, the solution is just add a minimum time block. A minimum time block is very, very simple. Whenever you lock funds, you cannot unlock them immediately. Let's say you wait for an hour, and then you can unlock it. So that's solves everything, right? There is no more flash loans. The problem is solved, right? Wrong. So for this first idea, it doesn't work for the following reason. We have this scenario. Let's say we are in the deactivation. Maybe we start in normal state. It's the same. Once you are in the deactivation or normal, what the attacker can do is first, and the attacker here needs to have the funds, so no flash loan for him. If the attacker is very rich, he can do the following. Lock half of the funds initially before the attack, and wait for the 1 hour that he wanted, that he needed because of this new addition that we added. After the 1 hour that we wait, attacker uses the same funds, like the same amount of funds, but from a different address. So the second half of the funds, but from a different address, so that it doesn't mess up the initial time lock, and lock again the second half. Now, once we lock the entire amount of funds needed to trigger the Vito signaling, we transfer back from the activation to Vito signaling, and now because the first address of the attacker, not the second one is stuck. It's stuck for an hour, right? But the first address, because he waited, as you see there, he just goes and he can withdraw the first half of funds. By withdrawing the first half of funds, there are not enough funds in the escrow to support the Vito signaling at this point, which means that now, again, the 24-hour clock refreshes. So we can do it, of course, continuously, which means that we have the same attack as before, but now we need to be rich to do it. But we don't want even to allow a rich user to be able to make the system to get stuck, and you need to attack the system to make the system work. So this solution is partial. So how do we solve this problem in full? We add another Vito signaling minimum duration. The Vito signaling minimum duration is 5-hour duration, in which after we enter the veto signaling phase, we stay there for 5 hours, even if the funds are not there. Which means that the attack from before, where we entered by locking new funds and then immediately unlocking to revert to the deactivation phase again, that won't happen here. Because now we will be in the deactivation in the veto signaling phase for 5 hours before we transfer to the deactivation phase. Which means that now, even if we try to do all of the complex attack that I just described, we still allow the submissions to happen, we still allow the execution to happen, which means that the attacker just have the regular power that it has by design. If you are very, very rich, you have $3 billion in ETH, you can delay the system for 45 days. That is, like, this is your right. But you cannot make the system to not be able to submit proposals or make them with zero money delay the system. So this is the first issue that I found. And the second issue that I found is the DOS loop to the dual governance. So what is a DOS loop? It means that, let's just focus on the important part. So in these two states, you can see there is no execution between those two states. It means that doing veto signaling and doing retreat to protect the users, we are not allowing the DAO to execute anything. But as you see, we might be able to loop between them forever. Veto signaling, retreat, veto signaling, retreat, forever. And then the system is stuck, of course. So why do we want to allow this? So maybe we are able to limit the number of iterations between veto signaling and retreat. Let's say a final number n of iterations from veto signaling to retreat, and after that, we are not allowing this to be a non-execution state. So how do we, why do we need this? Why do we need to allow this? So let's see, what if we limit the number of iterations? So in this what if case, we start with a normal state, then attacker comes with money from his own money and lock it inside of the escrow. Then we need to wait the 45 days as before. Like, we have 10%, 45 days, great. And then we have the rage quit. Doing rage quit, we transfer the funds, of course, to the withdrawal queue. We have to wait for who knows how long, some length of time, maybe a week, maybe more. And then we get the funds back and the attacker is happy. Now for the second time, notice this is the same rage quit as before as here. It's the same rage quit. So, and the second time we are in the rage quit, then the attacker again locks the funds, going to veto signaling, wait for the 45 days, and then again transfer to rage quit, and again we're in the withdrawal queue, wait the amount of time necessary, week, month, 3 days maybe, who knows, and then we get the funds back. So we do it again, 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 continuously. And then on the nth time, which is the last time we allow it by design, by this what-if design, we again lock the funds, wait the time, get the rage quit, transfer the funds to withdrawal queue, and wait again the time and get the funds back. So now we did it, so the maximum amount of time we were allowed. Then what happens is that the DAO can now submit whatever proposal it wants during this entire phase of and the last iteration of the veto signaling retreat loop. And then the DAO can now execute it because we cannot prevent it. We cannot veto signal again because we limit it to some final number n, which means that the DAO can maliciously create this loop and exhaust all of the supply of n times in a row that we allow, and then it can do whatever you want and steal all of the funds from the users or like break the protocol completely. So this is why we cannot use this what-if design to have a final number of loops. So we have to use this infinite number of loops to allow it. So why? So is everything broken? So not so fast. I lied to you a bit. The design is not that simple. It's not just 4 states and that's it. We have this design, which is very, very nice, very, very complex. Don't worry. We only look at this part, with the tiebreaker committee and the dual governance there. So let's zoom in and see how Lido solved this problem. So, if we have this loop of veto signaling, rage quit, veto signaling, rage quit, veto signaling, rage quit, now, once a year, that throughout the entire year, we have no execution state, which means only those 2 states, only veto signaling and rage quit. No normal state, no veto cooldown. Once a year, we can call the tiebreaker committee through a multisig, which is not related to a DAO. So now we have a multisig, which is, we allow it to have some power, but only on strict condition, only once a year, only if there was no other options to execute, and only then we allow it to execute something the DAO already approved. So it's a very, very weak component, but it's still enough to save us from being stuck forever. So once a year, we can allow it to execute the proposal even though the dual governance doesn't allow it. Which means that we can bypass the dual governance mechanism on certain conditions. For example, we have the once a year and also the only non-execute. Okay, great. So now we have now what is the problem with this? We have the veto signaling, rage quit, rage quit, of course. Now, once a year, what we do, we go to the normal state instead of going back to veto signaling and immediately going to the veto signaling state. This breaks the streak of non-execution states, which means that we are not allowed to call. We are not allowed to call to the tiebreaker committee to help us to execute proposals because we were transitioning to a mid state of normal state, which means that now the streak is broken and we could have executed, but we haven't. Great. So how do we solve this? Of course, we can do it forever. How do we solve this? This is the initial design, and the new design is this design, which means that now, if we are completely in a row of veto signaling and rage quit states, where non-execution, we are forced either to wait a year there, and then we can execute through the tiebreaker committee, or we are forced to move to the veto cooldown, and once we're in the veto cooldown, we can execute again. Great. Everything is solved. So, I have a blog post on this in our website about this design review. Also, you can check out the full design for Lido from the Git repo. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Lido team. This project has been very, very interesting, very innovative. And so feel free to join us to our party tonight. I'll be there. And this is my contacts. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I would love to answer. Thank you.